You've done it again. Different woman, different name, different face, different stories she told you in those first few weeks when everything felt clean and possible. Same dynamic, same arguments you don't remember signing up for, same walls going up after month 3, same slow erosion of what felt at the start, like something real. And now you're sitting there, maybe 38, maybe 43, maybe somewhere in between, doing the thing men do when a relationship ends. You replay it like game footage. You're looking for the moment it turned, the sentence that shifted the temperature, the week you got busy, the night you didn't show up right. You're searching for the hinge point, because if you can find it, you can control it next time. Or you do the other thing. You build a case. You list her flaws. You catalog the inconsistencies. You find the red flag you missed. You turn it into a story where the problem was her, and your only mistake was trusting too early. That story feels responsible. It feels smart. It feels like growth. It's also usually the story that keeps you trapped, because the thing you keep missing isn't mainly in her. It's in the part of you that keeps choosing the same emotional shape in different packaging. And I'm going to say this directly. Without wrapping it in language you can nod at and then ignore. This isn't mainly about the women. It's about you. Stay with me. This will be one of the more useful chunks of time you spend this week. Not because it's motivational, but because it's specific, practical, applicable, the kind of clarity that actually changes outcomes. Before we get into the mechanics, I want you to know where this is coming from. I've had 3 significant relationships in my adult life. I'm not going to give you the details, but I'll give you the shape. In the first, I was 28. She wasn't cold. She was affectionate. She was warm in all the visible ways. But there was a door inside her that stayed locked. There was a part of her I could never quite reach. Instead of treating that as information, I treated it as a challenge. I told myself she was complicated, that she'd been hurt, that patience would open what force couldn't. Second relationship. I was 34. Different woman entirely, different background, different personality, different life, and within about 8 months I was standing in front of the same door, different handle, same door. I noticed it had the thought every smart man has right before repeating a pattern. That's interesting. And then I spent 2 more years knocking. Third relationship. I'll spare you the specifics, but you can guess. It was only after the 3rd time that I stopped interrogating the women and started interrogating the dynamic. I stopped asking what was wrong with them and started asking what was right about this pattern for me. What did I get out of choosing someone who couldn't meet me cleanly? Why did this particular flavor of unavailability feel familiar? And what did familiar feel like chemistry? That question changed everything. Not instantly, not painlessly, but completely. Here's what most men in this pattern think is happening. They have a story about it, usually one of 3. Version 1, I have bad taste in women. This man genuinely believes his judgment is broken. He thinks he misses red flags he should have seen. He decides the solution is to become more logical, more cautious, slower to commit. He treats love like a screening problem. If he improves his filter, he'll stop selecting the wrong person. Version 2, I attract damaged women. This man believes there's something about him, his stability, his competence, his patience, that draws women with unresolved trauma. He sees himself as a good man stuck in a bad market. He's not wrong that some of these women have unresolved issues. He's just ignoring the part where he keeps choosing women whose issues match something in him. Version 3, I'm just unlucky. This is the most comfortable story because it demands the least self-examination. It's timing, it's fate, it's the universe being indifferent. It's just how the cards fell. Those stories are the symptom. They sound honest while still letting you off the hook. Now here's what's actually going on. Your nervous system, your body's automatic pattern recognition system, learned what love feels like before you had language, before you had logic, before you had standards. It learned from the first relationship you ever had, the one with your caregivers. And your nervous system doesn't primarily file away what was good. It files away what was uncertain. It locks onto inconsistency because inconsistency requires vigilance. Predictable love becomes background. Unpredictable love becomes the main event. So if you grew up with a parent who was warm and then withdrew, present and loving, then suddenly cold or distracted or critical without clear reason, your nervous system learned this is love. Love includes warmth and withdrawal. Love includes trying to figure out where you stand. Love includes that tension between connection and uncertainty. If you grew up with praise that was conditional, love when you performed, distance when you didn't, Your nervous system learned that love is something you earn, not something you receive. If you grew up in a home where emotions weren't welcome, where you were provided for but not met, your nervous system learned to minimize needs, to self-contain, to treat intimacy as risky. Fast forward to you at 37 on a third date with a woman who's charming and engaging and then suddenly a little distant. Your rational mind notices the distance and flags it as a concern, but your nervous system doesn't flag it as a concern. Your nervous system lights up. This feels familiar. This feels like home. And here's the word that gets men into trouble. This feels like chemistry. For a lot of men, chemistry isn't a sign of compatibility. It's a sign of recognition. It's your system detecting a familiar emotional climate, even if that climate is the one that has always cost you. This is why it's so hard for smart men to catch. By your late 30s and 40s, you're not naive. You've developed taste. You've developed discernment. You've been through enough to know what you don't want. You're not the 24-year-old who gets swept away without thinking. You analyze, you evaluate, you make considered choices. And that sophistication makes the pattern harder to see, because the pattern doesn't look the same twice. At 25, it wore the costume of intensity, the chaotic artist who made you feel alive. At 33, it wore the costume of sophistication, the high-achieving professional who was too busy for emotional depth. At 41, it wears the costume of self-awareness, the warm, thoughtful woman who talks about her history in a way that makes you think she's working on it while the same door stays locked. Different surface, same core dynamic. You trying to earn consistent love from someone whose consistency is not reliably available. And because each iteration looks different, you keep treating it like a new relationship instead of the same relationship in a new skin. Let's talk about what it costs to leave this unexamined. First, it costs time. Not in a panicked way. In a basic, real way. 2 years. 3 years. Sometimes 5. Spent trying to build something stable on unstable ground. That time doesn't come back. Second, it costs opportunity. While you're emotionally occupied by something half available, you are not available for something that could actually work. A good woman, one you could genuinely build with, doesn't wait around for a man who is still psychologically tied to a door that won't open. Third, it costs self-trust, not surface confidence. The real kind. The kind built from showing up consistently and having consistency returned. Every time the pattern repeats, your body collects evidence quietly that lasting love isn't available to you. That evidence isn't true, but it becomes felt truth, and felt truth drives your decisions. You deserve to stop paying that bill. Now let's add context, because most men have heard the buzzwords and missed what's actionable. Attachment theory matters here, but not in the way that people talk about it. The usable version is simple. Early relationships create a template for closeness. What you expect, what you tolerate, what you chase, what you fear, and what you avoid. Not as a preference, as a program. In adult relationships, the broad patterns often land in 3 buckets. Secure, comfortable with closeness and space. Doesn't panic when intimacy deepens. Doesn't panic when a partner needs room. Can communicate needs without making it a crisis. Anxious, craves closeness, but the nervous system is always scanning for signs of abandonment. Small shifts feel huge. Distance feels dangerous. Uncertainty becomes an obsession. Avoidant values independence to the point of emotional distance. Wants love in theory, but feels threatened by deep intimacy. Pulls away when things get real, not because they're evil, but because closeness triggers alarm. Now here's the trap. Anxious and avoidant people often magnetize each other. Anxious meets avoidant and thinks, this is challenging, this is interesting, this means something. Avoidant meets the anxious and thinks, this feels good, I feel wanted, I can feel connected without feeling engulfed, at first. Then the loop begins. Anxious reaches for reassurance. Avoidant feels pressure and pulls back. Anxious reaches harder. Avoidant withdraws more. Both end up reenacting the original wound. The person I want is not fully available. And because the early stage can be intense, the man tells himself the relationship is special when it's actually familiar. This gets harder at 35 to 45 because by now you've developed relationship scar tissue. Scar tissue protects you. It makes you tougher. But it's less flexible. It doesn't move like healthy tissue. It can make you interpret the present through the lens of old pain. So at 40, you're not only dealing with an old attachment template, you're dealing with years of reinforcement. Every time you pursued someone unavailable and stayed. Every time you tried to love someone into consistency. every time you felt that mix of connection and uncertainty. That doesn't teach your body to want better. Or it teaches your body that this is what love looks like. It deepens the groove. It makes the pattern automatic. And this is where a lot of men get stuck, especially the men who have already done the work. If you've been to therapy, read the books, watch the podcasts, and you can name your attachment style, listen closely. Understanding your pattern is not the same as being free of it. Insight is useful, but insight doesn't rewire a nervous system. You can understand the blueprint of a building and still live inside the building. Your pattern isn't mainly in your thoughts. It's in your body's definition of love. What feels attractive, what feels boring, what feels safe, what feels suffocating. Real change happens when you accumulate enough experiences of healthy consistency that your system starts to register consistency as desirable rather than dull. That takes time. It takes practice, and it requires a framework. Here's the framework. 3 steps, simple but not easy. If you do it honestly, it will change how you date. Step 1, map the pattern across your last 3 significant relationships. Not every woman you dated. The relationships that mattered. The ones you invested in. The ones that had any stakes. For each relationship, answer 4 questions. What hooked me early? Not she was nice. What was the hook? The mystery, the intensity, the way she needed you, the way she praised you, the way she made you feel chosen. What did I spend the relationship trying to get? Not practically, emotionally. What were you working toward? Calm, clarity, consistency, appreciation, respect, being prioritized, being fully let in. What was the repeating conflict? The same argument in different clothing, the same shutdown, the same escalation. Name the loop. How did I behave when I felt distance? Did you pursue, over-explain, get quiet and punish, become easygoing while building resentment, try to fix, try to earn your way back into closeness? Do that for all 3. Then step back and look for the common thread, not in the women, but in the emotional territory you keep returning to. Most men find one of 3 recurring dynamics. The pursuer-distancer loop. You reach, she retreats. You reach harder, she retreats more. The fixer project. You choose a woman with a visible wound and confuse loyalty with labor. The almost relationship. Never fully defined, never fully secure, never fully yours. Just enough to keep you engaged. If one of those shows up, good. That's data. That's step 1. Step 2. Identify the core need the dynamic was serving. This is where most men stop short. They name the loop and treat the naming as progress. It isn't. The loop is the symptom. The question is, what emotional need was it serving? Because you don't repeat patterns because they feel good. You repeat patterns because they feel necessary. Because the dynamic is attempting to solve something old. For many men in this pattern, the core need falls into one of these categories. The need to be chosen by someone unavailable. Because if you can make the unavailable person choose you, it proves your worth. It erases an old doubt. The need to be needed. Because being needed gives you a role. It gives you certainty. It gives you purpose. And it keeps intimacy at a manageable distance. Because you're doing, not feeling. The need for intensity as a proof of depth. Because calm feels like it's disinterest. Consistency feels boring. You confuse nervous system activation with connection. Pick the one that's most true for you, even if it doesn't flatter you. Write this sentence and finish it honestly. In my relationships, I keep trying to earn, not the acceptable answer, the real one. Step 3. Trace that need to its first logic. This is where men resist because it sounds like we're going to blame parents. We're not. This isn't about blame, it's about origin. The need you identified came from somewhere. It was learned. It was adaptive at the time. Ask yourself, where did I first learn that closeness requires effort? Where did I first learn that love can disappear without explanation? Where did I first learn that my needs were too much? Where did I first learn that being competent was safer than being vulnerable? Where did I first learn that calm connection wasn't available? When you connect that to your actual relationship history, the pattern becomes visible in real time. And when it becomes visible in real time, you have choice. Not control over attraction, choice over behavior. Now, I want to ground this with a story I have heard in different forms, more times than I can count. A man in his early 40s, competent, respected, career stable. He's built something. He's not a mess. He's thoughtful and loyal, the kind of man people describe as solid. 3 significant relationships since his mid-20s. Each lasted 2 to 4 years. Each ended in the same quiet place. Not fireworks, not dramatic blow-ups, but exhaustion. The realization that what he was reaching for was never fully reachable, that the connection was always just out of grasp. When he talks about the women, he describes them like they were completely different people. On the surface, they were. One was emotionally expressive, which felt like depth early on and later looked like a volatility. One was high-achieving and busy, framing emotional distance as independence. One was divorced with kids and even admitted she wasn't sure she had the bandwidth for a full relationship. Different women, same emotional result. I asked him one question. In each relationship, what were you trying to get to emotionally? He thought for a long time. Then he said something like, I wanted her to finally relax into me, to stop bracing, to choose me without conditions. And I asked a second question. Where did you first learn that you have to earn someone relaxing into you? He went quiet, then he said, My dad was around, but not really. He'd show up big sometimes and disappear other times. I was always trying to be the kind of son he'd stay for. That's the click. Not I have issues because of my dad. That's too vague to change anything. The click is, the emotional texture I've been chasing for 15 years is the emotional texture I grew up inside. That realization doesn't feel like victory at first. It feels like grief, because you realize you've been working on the wrong problem, but then it becomes relief because now you know what to work on. He spent the next months differently. He didn't become cold. He didn't shut down. He didn't pretend he didn't want love. He started noticing the pull, not judging it, not white-knuckling it, not calling it weakness, just noticing it and naming it. Is this chemistry, or is this familiarity? Then he did the most important thing. He started building standards based on behavior, not potential. He stopped investing based on who she could be if she healed. He started investing based on who she consistently was. That is what changes outcomes. Now let's make this practical because most men don't need more concepts. They need an interrupt. Something that catches the pattern while it's forming. Here are 3 interrupts that work because they're based on reality, not motivation. First, the consistency check. Early attraction will lie to you, so you need a metric that doesn't. Consistency. Ask yourself, does her interest show up steadily or in bursts? When there's tension, does she move toward repair or away from it? Do her words and actions match over time? When you express a need, does she respond with curiosity or a defensiveness? Is closeness naturally expanding, or are you always negotiating for basic effort? This isn't about perfection. It's about pattern. One bad week isn't a verdict. Repeated unpredictability is information. Second, the 2 conversations rule. If something matters to you, clarity, exclusivity, communications, effort, you bring it up directly. If it's dodged, minimized, mocked, or endlessly delayed, you bring it up one more time. 2 conversations, not 10. Not a year of hints. Not silent resentment. 2. If after 2 direct conversations the pattern remains, you stop arguing with reality. Men who get stuck in this loop negotiate with the locked door. They keep knocking because they don't want to accept what the door is telling them. This rule forces you into adult leadership. You respect your time. Third, the body signal list. Your body knows when you're in a healthy connection and when you're in the familiar pattern. You just don't treat your body like evidence. Make 2 lists. And when I'm in a healthy connection, I feel calm, clear, grounded, focused, open, playful. When I'm in the familiar pattern, I feel keyed up, distracted, obsessive, anxious after dates, relief when she texts, tension before bringing up needs, confused more than content. If you regularly feel relief instead of security, you're probably chasing. Relief isn't love. Relief is your nervous system exiting threat for a moment. Now a word about boring, because this is where a lot of men sabotage the right woman. Healthy can feel boring at first. Not because she's boring, because your nervous system is used to activation. It's used to uncertainty. It's used to the chase. So when you meet a steady woman, your system doesn't fire alarms and fireworks. It feels quiet. And quiet can register as no spark. The goal isn't to choose boring. The goal is to retrain your definition of spark. Real spark isn't anxiety. Real spark is being fully yourself in front of someone who stays. That kind of connection gets more alive over time, not less. It deepens, it expands. It stops costing you your peace. Let's bring this home. Different woman, different name, different face, same door, same locked thing on the other side that you keep trying to reach. That isn't bad luck. That isn't you being cursed. That isn't women these days. That is a pattern laid down early, refined over time, and still running efficiently in the background of your romantic life. It evolves with you. It gets smarter as you get smarter. It finds new costumes to wear. And until you make it conscious in a specific way, it will keep choosing for you. So do the audit. Map the pattern across your last 3 relationships. Identify the core need the dynamic was serving. Trace that need to its first logic. That isn't the whole work, but it's the beginning. And it's the beginning most men skip because it requires a kind of self-honesty we're not trained for. We're trained for external analysis, not internal archaeology. Set aside an hour and do it properly. Write it down. That hour can save you years. And here's what this isn't. This isn't about becoming numb. This isn't about trading passion for practicality. This isn't about settling for fine. This is about learning to tell the difference between depth and turbulence, between intimacy and the anxiety of chasing it, between a woman who challenges you to grow and a dynamic that simply reopens an old wound. Men who do this work, genuinely, not just intellectually, don't end up in less interesting relationships. They end up in better ones, because they're finally available for something that can actually hold their life, their ambition, their tenderness, their humor, their stability, their edge, their future. You've lived the pattern long enough. You know its shape. Now it's time to know yours. If this put language to something you felt but couldn't structure, don't just agree with it. Apply it. Measure behavior more than potential. Choose consistency as a standard, not a bonus. Honor your nervous system without letting it run the show. That's how the decade changes. That's how you stop ending up at the same door. That's how you build something real,